I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
I'm right with you, Red 3. Got a problem here.
Eject!
I can hold it.
Pull on!
No, I'm all right.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pseudo Nerd Podcast. I'm your podcast host, Josh Kiser. I'm joined today by my other co-hosts and cohorts, Josh Haddix. Say hi, Josh.
Hello, everybody.
And Kyle Hoagland. Say hi, Kyle.
Man, Haddix is just Mr. Giggles already.
Oh,
as you already heard, he's referring to him as Haddix, and you'll probably refer to me as Kiser because we're both Joshes and it might get confusing. And Kyle will be Kyle, Hougie, and probably about 1,000 other names throughout the duration of these podcasts. How are you guys doing today?
Can't complain. Cannot complain. It's almost Friday, so that's always a good thing.
I got to tell my wife, who asked me, hey, what do you want to do today? And I'm like, I am microwaving some hot dogs, and I'm going upstairs to the office to do this stupid podcast.
So she was probably a little disappointed because while we're out, for our listeners out there, while this is, for all of your knowledge, it's episode 1, it's technically episode 1.12 because we recorded this podcast yesterday, and it just was not very good, and that's maybe putting it lightly. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
As a disclaimer, we're not saying that any of them are going to be good.
That's true too. That's a great point.
What we recorded last night was dog poo. So.
And the thing is, I was the one that had to edit that dog poo to about like 10:30 at night last night, and then went to bed with my wife already asleep, and so I had to wake her up to go back in. So I think she thought that I would be available today to hang out, and I'm like, well, guess the two other jabronis want to re-record it. So here we are.
Can you clarify what you mean by woke her up to go back in?
No, I won't.
So for the listeners out there, and again, we might be just talking to ourselves and possibly Hoagie's wife, who might be our only other listener, maybe our moms, something like that, whoever's going to support us.
My mom has higher standards. She's definitely listening to this podcast.
This is true. We call ourselves the Pseudo Nerd Podcast, and why do we call ourselves that? Because the other names we wanted were all taken. I mean, seriously, think of a name for a podcast and Google it. It's already a podcast. I mean, how many options did we run through before we settled on this? And the only reason we settled on this is because it was finally one that we're like, well, nobody has it, and it's better than the other list of names that we came up with.
And we were about 3 hours before we were supposed to record the podcast.
The first time.
The first time.
Hoagie spent a majority of the time looking up what Alabama Slammer is on.
Yeah, we definitely spent some time on the Urban Dictionary.
For all of you under 18s, don't look that up.
So, pseudo nerd, meaning kind of a nerd, because that's sort of what we are. In many ways, we're into a lot of that nerdy shit. Your Lord of the Rings, your Star Wars, your Game of Thrones, the movies, the comic books, the superheroes, all that stuff. But at the same time, we also like our sports, and we're not by any means experts on any of these topics, and we all have our proficiencies and our deficiencies in all these topics. So we'll talk about anything from any of those things I just named to wrestling, to movies, to television shows, whatever pop culture kind of things that we want to talk about. And what we're going to try and do, because we don't want to just make this this is a movies podcast, or this is superheroes podcast, or anything like that, because we're not experts enough to pigeonhole ourselves into a particular genre, if you will. So we're going to just kind of change topics probably on about a month-to-month basis. So each month we'll pick a broad topic, and then we'll spend each week talking about a particular area of expertise, a facet of that, if you will. With this first month, for instance, is going to be our Star Wars month, especially, riding the coattails of The Force Awakens, which as of today, I think officially, or late last night or something, has passed Avatar for the most box office money in the States. It's not worldwide yet, if I recall, but they think with the way things are going to go in China, it should eventually pass Avatar. But at the moment, it's number one in the U.S., so we figured why not hit it right now while it's popular, because we're not trendsetters.
My wife is the only Twitter follower.
This is true. So
I think I'm a Twitter follower. So.
Well,
we all are
outside of us. Yeah. So that said, feel free to follow us at Twitter. What's our Twitter handle, Kyle?
It is pseudo nerd pod. The cast is missing because Twitter has character length limits.
So there you go. Follow us on Twitter. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you might have found us on Twitter, or you saw one of us post it to Facebook, or you're married to Kyle. So follow us. Let us know what you think about the show. Give us feedback. Tell us that this is boring, that this is fun, that you'd rather hear this. Give us your suggestions. Anything we say, if it's wrong, feel free to tell us. We're more than happy to tell you to shut up. And let's have some fun with this.
Absolutely.
No promises.
So like I said, this month we're talking Star Wars, and specifically this podcast, we're going to talk about the original trilogy. It makes the most sense, I think, to start out with the originals. So let me ask you this. Kyle, we'll start with you. Obviously, the Star Wars in general, we're all pretty big fans of, but we weren't always that way. When do you say you became a fan of the Star Wars series? What brought you in? Take us back.
Well, I think what really brought me in was our mutual friend Matt. He was the guy that when growing up, I grew up with He-Man toys and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and playing Legend of Zelda and Super Mario. Whereas, he still did some of that stuff too, but he and I think his father too collected a lot of the Star Wars, the action figures and all the different things that he used to have scattered down in their little basement. And so I actually really didn't watch any of the movies beginning to end probably until I was about 14, around the time when Phantom Menace came out. And not saying that Phantom Menace is a great movie, but I do give it credit that it gatewayed me into then going back and seeing the other ones, because now I felt kind of intrigued to then actually watch the original ones. And I think after that, and especially when we all lived together in the apartment and watching Revenge of the Sith, that's when I was hooked.
So when you say the Phantom Menace brought you in, did you watch the originals before Phantom Menace came out, or was it you went and saw Phantom Menace and was like, oh my god, that movie's awesome, I want to go back and watch the other ones? You can be honest here. We're not going to laugh at you for thinking.
No. Like I said, my age, it was tough for me to be a fan of Star Wars when I was 5 or 6. But whenever they were on cable television, you always had to watch it with all the commercials, and when a movie is 2.5 hours long plus commercials, and me having attention deficit disorder up the ass, there was no way for me to sit down and have the patience to watch all of that. So I watched some of the bits and pieces, and I know what happened. I just never actually watched the movie from beginning to end to really get the nooks and crannies of the storyline and the lore.
Sure. How about you, Haddix?
Kind of a similar story. I didn't, when I was younger, actually all the movies came out before I was born, but even when they were fresher when I was younger, I never watched them. And I was just trying to think about this. I remember watching the original trilogy on a car trip, but the DVDs didn't come out until 2004. So I don't know how I would have watched. I don't know if I don't know.
You guys have
portable
one of those
VHS
like
players, what
TVs
I'm
with the
saying.
VHS player that you can
I
like
don't
hook
know.
up in there?
I remember sitting in a car watching, watching them. So
Was
and
it
was
the
before 2004.
originals?
Yeah,
The original trilogy? Because I don't even think those came out on DVD till quite some time
No,
later.
those didn't.
Anyways.
Those are the ones that didn't come out until 2004 on DVD. The initial DVD release was September 21st, 2004. So I'm not sure how, but basically, somehow I don't recall the details. I watched the original trilogy maybe a couple years before Episode 1 came out. So I didn't watch them when I was younger, or if I did, I don't recall it.
Right.
I was like Hougie. I was very much into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman, the superheroes, all that kind of stuff. I really didn't
So nothing's
do a whole lot. Dude, I'm even more so into that than I was back
You
then.
actually have money to afford these habits
Yeah,
now.
exactly. I actually buy a lot of comics. So, but and I think I ended up rewatching them all, yet again before Episode 1 came out. And it wasn't that I was huge into it. I didn't go to the midnight showing for Episode 1, but I feel like pop culture wise, it just gets talked about a lot. And I am a fan of movies in general, so when a movie of that magnitude comes out, you go see it. So I guess I did my research by watching the originals yet again before it came out, and obviously many times since then. So
Sure. And I think part of the reason, because we all seem to have a similar origin for our love of Star Wars, our interest in Star Wars, because we're all basically, Kyle and I are 30, well, about to be 31 there, right, Kyle? And Haddix,
yeah, shit.
a couple weeks away for you. And Haddix, you'll be 30 this year, right?
yep.
So we're kind of in that middle tier of Star Wars fans where we were not born when the original trilogy came out. And once, Phantom Menace came out in 99, we're 14, 15. So it's, and I feel like Phantom Menace, much like Return of the Jedi to maybe you guys agree with this or don't, but I felt like those two movies were definitely targeted towards a younger audience than any of the others. And so when Phantom Menace came out, well, leading up to Phantom Menace, they re-released the George Lucas's, whatever you want to call him, when he goes in there and edits these movies, the original trilogy with the special edition, adds his stuff, and re-releases them in theaters. That was actually my first exposure to Star Wars. And so I guess in some regards I was a little bit later than a lot of people would. I didn't, as a little kid, I didn't, like you guys, I was into Ninja Turtles, I was into G.I. Joe, that kind of thing. And I do remember at one point when I was young, I had a C-3PO like action figure. It was like the only Star Wars toy I had, and I don't even know if at the time I realized it was a Star Wars toy. But that it wasn't until the special editions came out that I watched it. I was like, these movies are pretty cool. And then, of course, by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, I was midnight showing and excited as can be. And of course, now with Force Awakens, like we're at the point now where it's like this is awesome. Like we're excited. But back then, I think we just really it was the time period we were kind of fell between the two, where we weren't able to really appreciate the original trilogy, I guess, at the time. And to a lesser extent, I don't know if we were even able to appreciate like how big a deal it was when Phantom Menace came out.
I think by the time we watched the original trilogy, or we're at an age to really appreciate the story, it was way beyond the hype of the movie, even maybe the graphics. It probably was a little cheesy by the time I really watched it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially compared to the prequels, which we can get into later. But
yeah, because I mean, back, the movies that you loved as a kid. I mean, Ninja Turtles to me sticks out as like one of my favorite movies. Growing up, those live action ones, and Star Wars had. I mean, by the 90s, the effects that they had in the 70s and 80s was awesome, but 10, 15 years later, obviously it's not nearly as intense as it was back then. But I mean, they were they were doing crazy things that were, that would revolutionize, the movies that we saw in the 90s wouldn't have been where they were at if it wasn't for, Star Wars and George Lucas and what they did to pioneer a lot of that.
And you got to give credit to that when, it's going to show its age. It's going to, just like anything, it's 20 years old. It's going to show its age. But what was more impressive when you go back and watch them is a lot of that stuff is hand-drawn. A lot like it's painted. The prequels, when we start watching it looks prettier, but it's because it's CGI'd.
It's almost too CGI'd, and we're going to talk about the prequels, next in the next podcast. But I agree, there's something about these matte paintings that they did. It's just something that seems more realistic, and it's there's a beauty about it, if you will.
Well, it's just when you see real art like that, and you know how much time it had to take to do it. And I'm not saying that doing CGI is not time-consuming and expensive, but just knowing that somebody had to put, paintbrush to canvas or something like that, or whatever they used to actually do it, it almost gives you an extra sense of just appreciation.
Sure. And while we're kind of talking about the art, the other big thing for me was the music. And I mean, I think even non-Star Wars fans know some of the music from Star Wars, like that main orchestrated theme and the Imperial March. I bet you if you just asked the average Joe, they would be able to say, I'm pretty sure that's Star Wars, at least most people. And it's just, I don't know how you guys feel about the music in general, but it might have been one of the best parts about the movie to begin with, and it's still one of my favorite things that they did with the movies.
I think that's when I knew that I was officially, no turning back, I was a nerd, knowing that my first concert that I went to where I was it was important to leave and travel somewhere was with you guys, not Haddix, but you and me and Matt and Jason and a couple other people. We went to go see John Williams in Chicago. That was my first real concert experience, and whenever someone asked me, what was your first concert? I was I went to go see Usher, or I went to go see Metallica. I'm I saw John Williams.
And to be fair, have you ever seen, Haddix, have you ever gone to an orchestra?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I've been to Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and then, of course, we saw the Chicago Symphony with John Williams.
And we saw Distant Worlds.
Oh, that's right, we saw Distant Worlds as well. But John Williams was my first orchestra, and we had no idea what to expect because you go to this and John Williams, and for the podcast listeners out there that don't know John Williams, think of any orchestrated song from a movie. If it's good, John Williams did it. I mean, pretty much. He did the Superman theme, he did Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, he did the
Superman.
Olympic.
He got onto this movie because Steven Spielberg told George Lucas to get him because
that was just coming off Jaws. Yep.
Yeah.
So the guy's amazing. So we go there, Hougie and I and some others, and we're we're gonna dress up. You got to wear the suit because we figure it's an orchestra. You got to look nice. But Kyle, you can agree with me on this. But we walked in there and you saw everything from the older man and woman who you could tell go to operas on a normal Saturday night
with the tiny binoculars and the gloves and everything. Yeah,
exactly. To the kids in jeans and a t-shirt that maybe a Star Wars t-shirt that were walking around, and they had stormtroopers walking through this. I mean, it was probably like an orchestra event that you would not normally see if you went to an orchestra event.
It'd be like going to a midnight showing to a movie, like going to see The Dark Knight, and people are dressed up as the Joker and Batman and all those other things. And then there were people that were going, like I said, they were just normally going to go see a movie.
Right. It was a wild scene, but one thing that sticks out to me from that was John Williams. I mean, he's phenomenal, and he was up there talking. And this has nothing to do with Star Wars. It's more a John Williams story, but I think it's appropriate just to give you an instance of how great John Williams is. He was doing Schindler's List with Spielberg, and Spielberg and him are talking, and John Williams says to him as they're watching this scene that was done, and John Williams looks at Steven Spielberg and he says, "I'm not good enough to write this music." And Steven Spielberg looked back at him and told him, "You're right, but all the good ones are dead." So, I mean, John Williams he's a phenomenal talent. And what he did with the Star Wars, I mean, the music is great. And one thing that he took was this, it's called leitmotif, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a style of music that Richard Wagner designed for operas. And basically, it's used in every Star Wars movie. You take a theme for a particular character, and that theme is always played when that character is on set, on stage, whatever. But depending on the mood, he may play it slower, may play it faster, might sound a little darker, a little lighter, and it really helps get you into the mood of that particular moment. And I think it's a subtle thing that you may not notice when you're watching it, but next time you watch one of the movies, just listen. Like I think subconsciously you're hearing it, but you may not actually realize you're experiencing it as it's taking place. And I think that's really the genius behind it.
I believe it's pronounced leitmotif. And I was just looking at it, as I was looking it up real quick, do you remember the show or the movie The Peter and the Wolf? Where
I vaguely, I mean, I know I couldn't tell if you asked me what was Peter and the Wolf about.
There's no words to it, but everybody in there was a different instrument, and that's all it was just them playing instruments, either all happy, or it would be lower when like the duck was the oboe, and when the duck supposedly was killed, then the oboe was much lower. So yeah, it's like telling a story without any words or acting involved. It's just you're able to show emotion and such just through music and speeding up and slowing down.
That's great. That's a great point behind it, because I mean, a lot of what the success of these movies was not so much as just the dialogue as it was everything else around it. Because let's be honest, the dialogue could use some work.
Well, I think after going through all the movies, I think we all have understood, and I believe it's been said by the actors themselves, that George Lucas was not exactly the greatest when it came to making a script for people to actually speak.
Yeah, Harrison Ford was quoted as saying, like, it may be easy enough to write these words, but it's hard as hell to actually speak them.
It's almost like Lucas was like a novelist, but he probably should stay away from being a scriptwriter.
Yeah, I mean, the guy definitely has a mind for it. You can tell some of the stuff he came up with. And of course, you have your influences, and this whole thing was influenced from Flash Gordon and other sci-fi adventures. But to come up with all that, there's a genius behind it. But definitely, I think he was more writer and less the director, which is probably why he was not directing episodes 5 and 6, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, because he had other things that he was more the visionary and less the director side of things. And don't get me wrong, he's directed the movies he's directed have been great, but I think that's more because of the writing of, as far as like the story and the adventure and the universe. And that's one interesting thing for me with Star Wars is he created this whole universe of characters and planets and foods and beverages and you name it. He created all this stuff, and a lot of it could be the smallest thing. You might look on the screen and see this alien creature in the background. It's never talked about, but until Disney basically blew the cannon up, that character in the background. It has a race, it has a home planet, and there's probably 3 or 4 novels written about it.
Yeah, the expanded universe, I think, is the most impressive part. And whether or not, George Lucas did some of the things he did on purpose, I know there's been a lot of chit-chat. Again, I guess this is all before Disney got a hold of it, but we'll talk about that when we get to the Force Awakens podcast.
Right.
But, I mean, whether it was thought out, planned out, fell into his lap, whatever, you got to give the guy credit for making such an expansive universe. And I think that is by far one of the things that has drawn people to Star Wars more than anything.
Oh, I think the thing that's going to blow people away, for those who just have been like the moviegoers, and for a while that's what I think a lot of us were. We were just interested in the movies. That is such the tip of the iceberg when you go back and realize that there are characters, big player characters that are before any of the movies, thousands of years before the movies, and yet there's no movie about it that you would have not heard about it unless you were, either following either some sort of graphic novel or comic series or whatever the case may be, just some other type of literature. But I could name a bunch of different Sith lords that were never ever mentioned once in any of the movies, but there's such a deep history. It's crazy how deep it is.
Right, and to the credit of those particular people, this isn't all Lucas who comes up with all this stuff. He created the canvas, and then you got all these painters that are kind of writing their stories and letting things flow.
Didn't anything that, correct me if I'm wrong here, and I don't know where I heard this or if I'm just completely making this up, but didn't anything that got published or put out there at some point have to go through him though for a not necessarily
I'm not 100% on it, but yes, I think there's certain things that he had to okay. Like I think there was a story that was written at one point where Chewbacca dies. It's like a novel or something, and that was like something I think major things like that had to be okayed or approved or something like that. But if you're like, hey, I want to write a story about some Wookiees and their mishaps on Endor when one gets lost in a cave, like he'd probably be like, okay, you wouldn't need so much artistic approval on those kind of things.
Yeah.
But did he write like Darth Plagueis and Darth Bane and like Revan and all like that? Those types of characters who are in the story arc are huge people in the lore, but it's not something that George Lucas didn't mention any of the movies. Did he actually write any of that stuff, or did someone else come up with the idea and he just okayed it?
That I'm not positive about. We might get a Star Wars, one of our resident Star Wars experts on our third podcast when we kind of talk about our theories and review the Force Awakens, which, by the way, if you guys have not seen it yet out there, go watch it. We won't spoil it until then, but seriously, go watch it. Haddix and I are about to go see it again tomorrow.
You have 3 weeks, you maggots.
So, but yes, to answer that, I can't say for sure how much of that was Lucas, how much of that was just other people, and how much approval he has to have or not. I can't. I don't want to misquote or misstate something there, so I don't know for certain.
But it's such an important thing when people are such big fans of a certain story. Like I'll just real quick. Moving away from this, like another example would be like Dragon Ball Z and Akira Toriyama. He was the writer. He was the guy who created the canon. And after a while, they made another series called Dragon Ball Z, which he was like kind of like Lucas. He was like a creative consultant of it, but he didn't write it. And you'd be shocked how much fans shit on Dragon Ball GT, and their only reason why is because it's not canon. Because Akira Toriyama did not write it. It did not come out of his hands. So, but I feel like it's like the opposite. I feel like the Star Wars fandom, they embrace the creativity of other people that are creating these characters. But once again, I was just kind of curious of a lot of these. A lot of the people are like, what if this guy fought this guy or this guy? And I feel like some people are like, well, why does it matter? That guy's not actually real because George Lucas didn't make him. But I was wondering how much of a fan George Lucas, how supportive he is of these other people creating these characters.
I think, and maybe it's changed now, and I think even Lucas himself has sort of kind of probably had his ups and downs with how he feels about all that kind of stuff. But I would be surprised if Lucas wasn't a fan of the entire expanded universe and everything that was created, if nothing else than because he was making boatloads of money on all of it.
Oh god.
It keeps things fresh for 20. Waiting 20 years. Every 20 years is creating more movies, but people are still keeping it live and fresh. And
well, that's the thing. The best thing Lucas did is when he made this deal with Fox. At the time, they were offering him I think for American Graffiti, he was getting paid like $150,000 to direct it. And then they were offering him like $500,000 to direct Star Wars, which is a nice, considerable pay raise. I would take any of that right now, let alone back in the 70s.
Let alone late 70s, yeah.
So he says, no, pay me the $150,000, but I want two conditions. I get all merchandising rights, and I get all rights to the sequels. Well, at the time, sequels were kind of considered to be not a good thing. Like people who made sequels was sort of like looked down upon, which now it's like almost a guarantee. Like when you write a movie, it's like, well, do you have a trilogy in mind? Do you have, back then it wasn't like that. And then on top of it, merchandising, especially toys, because that's pretty much what we're talking about at that point, was not considered to be a profitable venture. In fact, Fox lost like a ton of money with Dr. Dolittle toys. So they're like, yeah, screw it. You're an idiot, George. We'll pay you less, and you can do whatever you want. Well, you can see how well that worked out.
Yeah.
The toys skyrocketed back then, and pretty much billions and billions and billions of dollars later, George Lucas is doing quite well for himself.
Yeah. Well, and to jump back to the whole story thing, I mean, it's well-known knowledge that he actually hired somebody else to write episode 5. And, we kind of touched on this the other day, but the lady who wrote it ended up passing away, and he ended up rewriting it. But I'm sure he probably used a chunk of what she came up with,
Sure,
added his own spin to it, and then there was obviously many, many rewrites of every script, from then on. And I highly doubt he came up with every rewrite. Some people probably added some things. So I don't think he's necessarily opposed to other people suggesting things.
Sure, yeah, that's a great point. And really, so the episode you're referring to is Empire Strikes Back, which that, of course, having the biggest plot twist of all time at the time. I mean, that's probably like an M. Shyamalan sort of twist. Back in what was that, right around 80? When did
Yeah, that was it, 77, 80, 83.
Yeah, okay. So the Darth Vader being Luke's father, which was not the plan. The original movie came out, when A New Hope came out, he was dead like they talked. Like it was not anything. And then when they decided to make that twist, secret that they kept pretty well under wraps, which is amazing if you think about it now with Twitter and social media. It's pretty hard to kind of keep a secret like that, and with all the internet rumors and this and that. At some point, someone somewhere has come up with a theory on this person or that person, and some make a lot more sense, some don't. So for that to keep under wraps at the time was pretty big deal.
Oh yeah. I feel like that's a big talking point. We're all fans of Reddit. I don't know if anyone listening will know what that is, but it's basically like a forum site. And I feel like the spoiling of movies, whether it's in the trailer or all these articles online, is like a big problem these days. And people always give shit to directors or producers or whoever that put these trailers together about ruining things.
Oh, yeah, don't even get me started on movie trailers these days. Yeah. It just upsets me. But the Vader-Luke dynamic really changed the layout of how the Star Wars movies came together, because before then, it was A New Hope was going to be the first movie, and then when they decided to make a sequel, that was going to be, Star Wars Part 2, Empire Strikes Back. And if there was a third one, it was going to be Return of the Jedi, Part 3. Just like any normal trilogy. When he did the Vader is Luke's father, he said, I realize now I'm writing a 9-piece saga and I'm in the middle of it. I think he anticipated the Obi-Wan, Anakin dynamic with each other. What turned Anakin to the dark side. What caused Obi-Wan and him to have a rift when he was his master and that kind of thing. And then eventually the 7, 8, and 9, how that all, more Luke's side at that point, Luke's follow-up after Vader and the Emperor are gone, and everything that kind of played out from there. Of course, now it's not exactly I don't think what's happening now in Force Awakens and going forward is what Lucas originally had planned. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think he had something in mind, and it's sort of evolved over time, because I don't think episodes 1, 2, and 3 were what he originally anticipated either.
Right.
And part of that has to do with times changing and where we're at, and we'll get into the prequels next time. So I'll stay away from that for now.
And George Lucas changes his mind all the time. If anybody who's ever really followed along with his thought process and everything else, he has gone back and forth and changed sides many times.
He is as flippy floppy as they come, that's for sure. And I think, well, let me ask you guys this, because it plays right into it. The special editions with the trilogy, so the original trilogy, do you like the changes that were made? I mean, they're, for the most part, subtle-ish changes. Couple big points. The whole, Han and Greedo, who shot first sort of thing, is one that upsets a lot of the hardcores. I don't know if you guys have any input on that or care.
I felt like it was an unnecessary change. I mean, I think I'll speak for Haddix. As long as Porkins is still in the movie,
Dude,
I think everyone's happy.
if you edit Porkins out, you're just a fucking idiot. But again, I think it's tough to. I think I'd feel different if we were 14 or 15 when the originals came out, and we're big fans, and then kind of these special editions kind of came out and they changed things. Maybe we'd feel more strongly about it.
Right.
So I really don't care. I agree with Hougie. I don't think any of them were necessary. But I think one of the downsides to having such a popular series is that your fan base is so large that doing one thing, I feel like there's so much pressure on you to do things correctly because you don't want this big backlash. So,
but there's no such thing as correctly when you have so many people that want things to happen in different ways.
I think one of the reasons he's so flippy-floppy is if he says something and it gets such bad publicity or bad, there's such a negative reaction, I feel like he's like, well, shit, I can't do that anymore. Like, people are going to tear it apart, say it's stupid. And don't get me wrong, some people still say that about some of the stuff that did get released. But, you almost can't blame the guy with having such a following of people that are so passionate about it. You're always going to piss somebody off. So
yeah, I mean, you're never going to please everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like How I Met Your Mother.
That's a whole nother podcast that we can discuss.
We don't need to get into that, but if you binge watch it, I think it's 10 times better. So that's my input.
And that's how I watched it.
This is true. That's how you watched it. But on the topic of the special editions, some of the things he added, I think were okay. Like, so he added the scene with Jabba the Hutt in Episode 4, where Han Solo is meeting him at the docking bay and telling him like he's gonna have his money soon and all that, which was really it. I think what I liked about it is it was cool that was a scene that was filmed way back when, but at the time Jabba was played by a dude who kind of actually looks like Porkins. He's just like a fat guy. So I'm just stereotyping everybody right now. But
yeah, seriously, dude, come on.
They cut it out and I'm not sure if that was because George didn't decide that's what he wanted Jabba to be or what, but to put him in there and actually CG this, Jabba the Hutt creature instead of the guy, I thought it was very well done for the time. Especially, there's one point where Harrison Ford actually walks around like behind Jabba because he's just a dude, so he can walk right around him. Well, when they CG him in, they're like, well, what do we do? So they make it look like he steps on his tail. And it's kind of hokey a little bit because if you think about it, like Jabba's really big, like where if you walk directly behind him, you really can't like just walk directly behind Jabba. You got to walk way behind him. And they sort of just play it off, but it's kind of cool they do it that way. But could you imagine now, like if Jabba the Hutt wasn't like the Hutts are these like fat blobbish creatures, like it'd be so different if they were just like if Jabba the Hutt was like a dude and not this.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's easy to say that now looking back, but if that's how it always was,
right?
Maybe we look at it differently, or if it's like how those rumors that Porkins was supposed to be a pig type of character, which although I love Porkins how he is now, but if that's how it was from the beginning, we'd probably think, oh, it'd be weird if he was fat, or this snail.
It's weird if he's actually a dude. But it's Porkins. I don't know about that guy.
Porkins is awesome.
The best part about Porkins is when we were having this discussion. We watched the original trilogy before we went and saw Force Awakens, and we were talking about Porkins, and having that whole debate: was he named first? Was Porkins? Was the actor there or not? And what you found, Haddix, that he was maybe originally supposed to have a. You said he said this, or did Lucas tell this story?
Someone said that in an interview. The gentleman that plays Porkins, what's his name again?
He's got like Hootkins or something.
Hootkins,
I think it was
yeah, Alan Hootkins, something Hootkins.
I'll look him up real quick.
Hootkins was getting interviewed.
William Hootkins.
So my buddy Billy Hootkins, he was getting interviewed, and they said he could have been joking when he said this. I don't know if it was ever verified by literally anybody else other than him in this interview, but that he was supposed to be a pig type character. And as we know, or as anyone knows who's seen the originals, well, and any of them, there's a lot of different types of characters in these movies. But he's supposed to be a pig type character, but the prosthetic nose that he was going to have on, I guess, didn't look right. So they ended up just scrapping it, and this guy who was going to have the nose on just ended up playing Porkins. And they just rolled with it. So
to his credit, his IMDb page, William Hootkins, it's actually fairly impressive. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
He has a lot of little spots here and there, but he was in Batman, the original, the 1989 Tim Burton. He was.
So how many things was he in before Star Wars?
Before Star Wars, let's see here.
I mean, does he have to credit George Lucas for kicking off his career?
Well, I'm trying to.
Is he like the Screech Powers, where like you're always gonna be Porkins, no matter what you do? You can have the most serious. You could be like the star of a doctor drama. You'll always be Porkins.
Okay, so before Star Wars, he was in a BBC Play of the Month. He was in Twilight, episode of Twilight's Last Gleaming. He was as Bill Hootkins.
My buddy Billy Hootkins, I told you.
Yeah, he was in a TV series for an episode called Plays for Britain. He was in a TV series episode of BBC Two Playhouse, and then he was in Big Zapper as a henchman. So really not much before Star Wars. And then he actually, right in the same year Star Wars came out, he was in a movie called Valentino. Now let me tell you this. As a fat guy, Kyle, you can weigh in on this. No pun intended.
Right?
His name was Porkins in Star Wars. In Valentino, his name was Fatty. So what is more offensive as a fat guy?
I feel like if you're an actor and you want to get parts and you're fat, then screw it. Just embrace it. You're going to get parts. It's almost like being a little person. It's like you're guaranteed to get some movie part.
Yep. And there's another movie. He was a character called Beef. So I think he just embraced it. George Lucas must have loved the guy. He was also in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was in Flash Gordon. He was actually in Superman 4. So the guy might be kind of a nerd himself.
Dude, Hookins, man, has he passed away or is he still alive?
Great
I think
question.
he's
Let me
passed away. I
scroll
think we
to the
looked this
top.
up.
He died in October of 2005, so
Dude,
almost
rest
11
in
years
peace.
ago.
Rest in peace, dude. 10
Age
years.
He brought
57,
smiles to
so
our faces.
I'm gonna guess the weight may have caught up with him.
Well, you know what? It sounds evil, but good for him that he didn't lose the weight.
He was also EverQuest 2. He was the generic male barbarian merchant, generic male dark elf, and generic male dwarf.
He was just keeping busy.
Yeah,
Up
he
to
was.
when he died. That must have been when the diabetes kicked in. He couldn't move anywhere. He lost both
He
his
was
legs.
acting till 2005. So yeah, I mean he was
It's actually diabetes.
Diabetes.
So I mean, while Bill Hootkins was a critical part in the Star Wars legacy,
I think we talked more about Porkins than than any other
than
talking
anybody
point.
else, which is kind of what I was going to get at. Obviously, this movie sort of jumpstarts the careers of Harrison Ford, especially. I guess Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill to a lesser degree. They're best known for this. Of course, Mark Hamill's done a little bit since then. I don't know what Carrie Fisher in a whole lot after this, other than cocaine.
And Jane Silent Bob Strike Back as a
I
nun.
think I know Carrie Fisher was in an episode or two of 30 Rock, which again, man, it's not going to do much for you. But
Right.
But I couldn't tell you. Not that I'm some connoisseur of movies, but I couldn't tell you anything else she was in. So
yeah, I'm just glancing back. It looks like she was in a movie here and there. Yeah, she had a few movies every year, an episode of a TV show here and there. So nothing. I mean, just glancing at it, what is she?
But they couldn't get themselves. Both her and Mark Hamill couldn't get them. I don't think they could break the shackle of being Luke and Leia Skywalker, or I'm sorry, Luke Skywalker and Leia or Organa, whatever.
To give Hamill credit, and I mean I know it's not his face, but I mean he's well known for his Joker voice as well.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. I guess he's well known in like our circles, like the nerd circles. I don't know if
I mean
the average Joe
his.
is not going to say Mark Hamill like here talk to Luke Skywalker. We're like that's the Joker from the 90s of Batman.
But I mean I think if you played a Joker voice and showed it as Luke Skywalker, probably the majority of people would recognize the voice more than him.
That's fair. I agree.
In our generation, just because
right. Which he's a fantastic Joker.
Oh my God! To me, he is his voice is the Joker.
Yes, and I watched him in Arrow, not Arrow, The Flash, playing Trickster, which is a role he brought back from his previous. Yeah, that's the word.
Reprised. I think is what you're saying, right?
Yes, he reprised his role of Trickster from the previous '90s Flash, which I think may have been what got him the role of Joker. Was the voice and stuff. They heard him play Trickster and wanted him for the Joker. I might be wrong on that, but I swear I heard that somewhere.
Dude, I heard to throw this in a little quick, because I was, maybe a couple weeks ago, I was like looking up videos of, I wanted to see him doing the voice, because I just never seen it. And he actually told a story that he did so many voices that he went into the rehearsal, did a voice for the Joker, and didn't think he was going to get it, ended up getting a call back. They said that they loved it, and he couldn't remember the voice that he even used for it. So they actually ended up like playing it back for him. Was like, well, this is what you sounded like, and he was like, oh, okay, and then kind of kept going. But he was like, I thought I did such a bad job, I didn't even remember what I sounded like, and they ended up loving it, which thank God, because he's an amazing Joker. But
oh yeah, absolutely. So him and Carrie Fisher, they didn't do terrible afterwards, but that's pretty much their claim to fame is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Where Harrison Ford, that jumpstarted his career, and I can name 15 movies that he's in that are just great. Obviously, Han Solo and Indiana Jones are probably his most well-known characters because they're multiple movie franchises. Which, when the original Star Wars came out, none of them were signed on for multiple contracts, and Harrison Ford didn't even want to do, by Return of the Jedi, he was like over it, I think, and didn't have any desire to do it. and there was originally talks about killing off all the characters other than Luke Skywalker because they in true spaghetti western style, but Lucas wanted no part of that. Because,
well, especially if he's got the merchandising.
Right, exactly.
Contracts,
He wanted to make sure that everybody was alive, it was happy, and that he could sell lots and lots of toys. Specifically, so let's talking about the toys real quick. One of the biggest selling toys was Boba Fett. And I just, why? Why? What are your guys' feelings on Boba Fett?
Fuck Boba Fett. He was the only toy I ever had, other than this gold Millennium Falcon that we won from like the Glue Micro Machines thing, which I think we sold later in a garage sale. But Boba Fett had his only ability was you pressed a button on his ass and shot his one missile, and he didn't do anything. I don't care. Any nerd wants to come up to me and say Boba Fett was a huge, person in that movie. No, he wasn't. His claim to fame is going to Vader and saying, "Hey, Han Solo's in Cloud City." That's his thing. Other than that, he's a jobber.
Now that said, I mean that's not nothing. There was plenty of other bounty hunters out in space that had Greedo. Boba Fett did what Greedo couldn't do, So to his credit, he at least put him in a position to be captured, which is something that no other guy did.
Yeah, but at that point, Han Solo was also responsible for meddling in the destruction of the first Death Star. So obviously, he's a marked man way more now that the Empire is now looking for his ass.
That's fair, but the Empire couldn't even find him, and it was Boba Fett. So give some credit to Boba Fett in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing. Like we said earlier, I didn't watch these movies soon after they came out.
You didn't go to the 1980 premiere of Empire Strikes Back?
I didn't go before I was born. So, leading up to when I first watched the movies, to really get into them, I knew Boba Fett was a big character, and I will admit that after watching them, I did not understand why. Because other than he did find Han, he's not even really in the movies that much, let alone this huge character that drives the story or anything like that. I mean, he does catch him, like you just said, so give him some credit. It's why he's known more than other bounty hunters. But other than that, I never got it.
Yeah, so I did some research on that because I was really curious, and like you said, we're too young to be around when it came out. But I guess there's a lot of hype around this mysterious character when they were doing their promotions and previews and trailers leading up to Empire Strikes Back, and they showed this guy. And in fairness, he's got this, cool-looking suit. He's got this jetpack, and I mean, back then jetpacks were pretty badass. And you're like, who is this guy? What is he going to do? So there's a lot of hype, and then of course you get like Kyle was talking about, you have the toys. So it's like, okay, this guy could be pretty cool. And I think it was, I think it was a letdown. Maybe back then it was enough to satisfy the kids, but I think what really hurt Boba Fett was the Return of the Jedi death scene, and the fact that he was one of the biggest joke deaths ever, and it's something that a lot of the hardcore fans are one of the many things the hardcore fans get pissed at Lucas for.
He didn't even get a good death. He died off screen. It wasn't like you watched him go in and get eaten, right? He kind of skidded down into the pit.
You see the jetpack get shot or malfunction or however it does, and he falls into the pit. That's how it is, and that's it. So he gets eaten down in the Sarlacc.
Right, but it's not even graceful. It's not like you don't even really see him dying, but you see him going into the pit.
Right.
But other than that, and I know it's assumed, but you think if someone's got a decent role or enough where you're going to merchandise the shit out of him, that you at least give him a death that's fitting of what would be considered right now probably the third most important bad guy right now, besides Vader and the Emperor.
Yeah, he's up there. Who else? After that, you got Grand Moff Tarkin in the first one. It's not like they're Jabba the Hutt, who gets choked out by Slave Leia. those are probably the big time villains, right? I mean, is there somebody else that sticks out in your mind as like a named villain? I mean, you get these admirals and stuff that are getting killed left and right. Which, by the way, if you're an admiral for the Imperial, like that's not a good position to have, right?
Once you're admiral, you're dead in 20 minutes, according to the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're that guy in the background, and it's like, just don't fuck up, dude, don't fuck up, and then he fucks up, and like, he's like, congratulations, then he's like, don't let this happen again, Admiral, and then you're like, God damn it. You just know there's like a death sentence on your head. But if you're in the Star Wars universe during this time of unrest, civil unrest, I believe is the actual quote, where do you think you'd find yourself?
Dude, I'm broing out with Yoda. You know what I'm saying?
Yoda's in the middle of Dagobah by himself. You couldn't even find Dagobah.
I'm just chilling with him, dude. I'm just going to take a little nap with him when he takes that nap. Just gonna roll over and take a little
what would be the ideal place to be? I mean, you'd like to say that, I'm going to help the rebellion fight them, but like, would you really? Would you really like want to fight the Empire?
I feel like Cloud City was a decent place to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud City wouldn't be bad. It's a mining.
I hear Alderaan it's got nice summers.
I think I would be okay like hanging out at Jabba's palace. If you were like a kind of like a scoundrel, if you will.
As long as you weren't a woman.
Because, well, I'm not, so I don't got to worry about that. But the one thing I find about Jabba's palace, though, it's very so there's that whole part where it's nighttime, I guess. Everybody's sleeping. It's dark in the palace, and that's when Leia's dressed like the bounty hunter, and she walks up there, and she's she drops the carbonite down, and she's like unfreezing them, and then you hear the ho ho ho, and like all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, like it's a trap of some sort, and like
it's a trap.
The curtains like sway out of the way, and there's of course Jabba, and he's got his little like rat thingy that like hangs around his tail. And then there's like 14 other people just hanging out, like with Jabba, like in that room. Was everybody just sleeping? Like people just like all cuddled up, like in this like one room, like nobody.
It's like it's a 10 by 10, like 3-walled, like cul-de-sac looking room.
And they're all like cuddled up together. I mean, maybe Jabba's like nice for warmth, and he's like kind of comfy. Like he sort of looks like he'd be like a good like a beanbag chair. So maybe that's why they're laying there. But it just always seemed very weird to me that everybody just seems to be like I don't know, if I'm like hanging out at Jabba's palace, like I'll sit there, watch the live entertainment, special editions. I hate you in that scene, but you watch live entertainment, you can pretty much eat and drink and do your thing, and like Jabba will hook you up as long as you don't mind like stealing and smuggling and that kind of thing. But I think like after when everyone's like, all right, I think it's last call, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to head to my little adobe house down the street in the middle of the desert. I'm not going to just hang out here and sleep with everybody else like in this one little tiny room. Like that just seemed a little weird to me.
Well, in episode 6, it's just weird. I mean, my thing that I've always was confused about outside of that scene and fuck Boba Fett was when Princess Leia is on Endor and she runs into one of the Ewoks, she's completely unarmed, and the little bear has a little spear and is like seeming pretty violent, like get the shit away from me, like I'm gonna kill you. And she's talking to it like it's okay, I'm not gonna hurt you. It's like, bitch, you're not the one with the spear. What the hell are you doing trying to be like, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you? I'm like, I don't think that's what he's thinking.
I don't think he's concerned about it's like, wait, aren't you more worried that I'm going to hurt you? Like, if you're like walking down, the mean streets of Detroit and it's 2 a.m. and some dude pulls a gun out at you, you're like, hey, don't worry, dude, I'm not going to hurt you.
Like, that would just
not
blow
to compare,
that.
Like,
that would blow your mind.
A gangster in Detroit to an Ewok with a spear, but
they're the same thing.
It's like apples and apples either.
Yeah.
So Haddix, how about you? What is one scene from any of the movies or a moment or something that really sticks out? It could be funny, it could be just a well done scene. Like what
you know what pisses me off the most? That they killed off Porkins. Like, why would you get rid of such a great character? You could
You
have
know,
just,
to be fair though, Porkins' death may have been might have been better than Boba Fett's death.
true. That is
It
true. At
is.
least he died heroically.
He died, at least I feel like he at least got as far as getting into outside the Death Star, going through that event. He at least was helping. Boba Fett didn't do anything. He stood there. He fired off a couple of shots or whatever, and Luke, who magically now is a younger Obi-Wan, when the first two movies he was a crying bitch.
Yeah, somehow
After a year of
Well,
training,
he's been a year of training. I
became
mean,
an expert on everything.
which I mean, I guess is supposed to mean something because Luke is supposed to be, according to the canon, outside of Anakin, is supposed to be, on the as far as the light side of the Force, one of the greatest, if not the greatest outside of Yoda.
He must have a lot of those midi-chlorians.
I will say this. Back to your question.
Yes.
I think, and I am sure you guys will agree with me as the majority of people, I don't think I've yet to see a great argument in favor of this, but the whole reprisal of the Death Star, like,
Yes, where they brought the Death Star back for the
coming back, and I mean,
Now, is your argument? It could be both, I guess. But are you more upset that Lucas and the writers decided, like, hey, let's do another Death Star? Like, why would they do that? Or are you more like from the actual, just the canon of being inside the minds of the Empire? Like, what were they thinking? Like, let's try that thing that blew up in our faces.
I mean, I think it's both. I mean, because you can't fault the Empire in the sense of, this is a written story that someone wrote. So, you ask yourself.
Well, I mean, when I say fault the Empire, obviously I'm not talking about the script itself. Like,
right, he's saying, does you think the Empire is their shortcomings?
I'm talking about, like, as if you're actually in the Empire, like, what was the Emperor thinking? Was he just really that arrogant? Like, we're just going to try this again?
And maybe that's the argument, is like they thought that they were so powerful that they could do the fucking same thing again. But I don't know if it's a cop out on Lucas or the writing staff's part. I don't know. I don't have a suggestion on what would have been better. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit here and say it was shitty and they could have done this and it would have been better. I have no idea what they would have done instead. I guess you need kind of that global threat. So that provides that, what I mean? I mean, it could destroy planets, so, it's like this big thing that's going to affect everybody because they could just blow up whoever the fuck they want. So
there's actually some interesting expanded universe stuff with all that, where the Empire was actually creating that stuff to stop a larger threat of, like, interdimensional aliens or something. I'm probably misquoting it a little bit, but there's a whole story where you're like, actually the rebellion fucked everything up, and the Empire was actually, like, doing the universe a solid. Yeah, it's a pretty good story.
I'm not going to say that I hate it, that I think it's like the worst idea ever, but I think it's a point that a lot of people bring up is you're recycling.
I think it's a little lazy. Yeah. I guess it's probably their way of saying, like, how are we going to be able to kill off Vader, the Emperor, and lots of the Imperial forces all in one fell swoop? Like, well, let's just put them all in one thing and blow it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I feel like they had to have been making that one while the other one was still operational. Like, the Death Star is not a small craft by any means.
Well, to be fair,
and it's only been blown up a couple of years, so it's not. So
I mean, yeah, if you think about it, and the Emperor, let's say because the Emperor, he doesn't show up until the third movie. So you think, like, maybe the Emperor's like, oh shit, my first Death Star blew up. Like, let's get started on another one.
I thought he was an Empire in, like, the hologram once.
That's fair. He was there, but I mean, he wasn't he wasn't taking care of what was going on screen, I guess what I'm saying.
Sure.
So you give it off, like, filing.
They didn't introduce the Emperor in Empire and Return of the Jedi.
Yes, that's fair. So maybe the first one blows up and the Emperor's like, oh shit, I need to get another one started right away. So even then, you're looking at, like, I think the time difference might be 3 or 4 years from New Hope to Return of the Jedi.
I thought you looked it up and it was a year.
It's a year from Empire to Return of the Jedi. So that's 1 year there. I'm talking about from New Hope to that. So 3 years or something. Like, it's not that much of a difference. It may be 2
It
years.
takes longer to build a bridge, let alone something the size of a moon.
Now that's no moon, dude. That's a
I walked into that.
Yes, he did.
but it was. I mean, that's credit to the Emperor and the Empire itself. Like they do pretty damn good quick work. So it's not that it's very efficient. They do a good job there. So
Put enough subordinates in it, and you can make the pyramids, right?
that's exactly.
True.
Well, I think we've chatted enough about the original trilogy, and honestly, we could probably sit here for another hour and talk about all kinds of other things. I mean, we barely touched base on, Yoda and really the characters in general, outside of the important ones like Porkins.
We didn't talk about old wily Ben Kenobi either.
We didn't.
Right? For another-
One more quick story about Ben Kenobi before we end this, because obviously he's basically in A New Hope, and that's it. A voiceover here and a shadowy ghost thing in
He was the
Return.
Force.
But the best part is they land. They get the tractor beam pulls them into the original Death Star, and he tells them, "Hey, you guys hang out here. I'm gonna go take care of the tractor beam." Which, first of all, like, why wouldn't he be like, "Hey, why don't we?" Since you got a lightsaber now and kind of using the Force, and Han, you could like pretty good with a blaster. Why don't you guys like help this old man like take down the tractor beam? But no, he like leaves him there, and then of course they go off to save the princess anyways. But he didn't know that at the time. He's like, "I got this." So he starts creeping around the Death Star, and he might be like the least like stealthy person I have ever seen. And nobody fucking sees him there. Except for, like, Vader's kind of like, I'm pretty
sense
sure
him.
there's a senile old man walking around here.
Vader can sense him, but
And maybe
he's walking
maybe
like
that's
in the middle
it,
of the
too.
hallways.
Maybe, like, stormtroopers and stuff are like, who's the weird old guy in a robe just waltzing around? Like, did we just, like, let him go? Like, is there, like, a nursing home on... This battle station's so
they
big.
ignored him like he has dementia. Like, he just thinks he's in the army. Let him go.
That's just crazy old Ben Kenobi wandering the halls again.
And in the terms of every football announcer on Sunday night, Monday Night Football, he's a wily old veteran.
And the other thing is, when he goes to take care of the tractor beam, there are no guardrails on.
Yeah.
You could easily fall off the side of that if you're going to like do any work on the tractor beam.
Yeah, but well, I understand how he can do it. Obviously, he's a master of the Force. He can use that. Being old doesn't really mean much to him if you're powerful in the Force.
Right, I just mean from a structure, and maybe that's why the Death Star in general was built so quickly, is because OSHA regulations were thrown out the window. They didn't have to worry about guardrails or anything. They just like, fuck it, throw this thing together. We're gonna have a lot of gaping holes and when Luke falls off that thing, he like falls like into this pit of abyss and then just like catches in this thing in tube and slides out. Or
he goes into like probably the funnest slide I've never been on. Like I would love to fall down that hatch.
And that's actually, I misspoke. That's Cloud City there. So
right.
Apparently there's just no OSHA in the galaxy a long, long time ago.
Far, far away.
Far, far away. So if you guys get anything from today's podcast, know that if you really want to build something and you don't care about regulations, you need to live in the Star Wars universe.
Amen.
So I guess we'll end it on that. Next week we'll talk about the prequels, what else George Lucas could screw up, and our favorite moments.
I'm going to give it the credit it deserves.
Oh, well, there you have it. And not to say it doesn't deserve credit, so it should be an
even though everybody
podcast.
says it doesn't deserve credit.
Let us know what you guys think. This was try 2.5, and keep us posted. Did we like it? Did we stay? Was what you guys were hoping? Did you expect something differently? Let us know. What was that Twitter account again, Kyle?
It is at pseudonerdpod.
At pseudonerdpod. There you have it. So for Kyle Hoagland, Josh Haddix, and I'm Josh Kiser.
Do it. Say it. Say it now. Say it.
I wanted the drum roll. From the Great Lakes to the Golden Gates. We'll see you guys.
Gets me every time. See you later.
See you next time. You don't listen.